this afternoon is a conversation, or it might be a debate, let's see. And it's about the impact post-COVID of on offices and commercial estates. And what we're really going to look at is how businesses will reopen. So this afternoon, I've got an amazing panel of experts together. So we have Anthony Bennett from Bennett Hay, Chris Sheppardson from EP, and Roy Westwood from Forward Associates. And I think rather than me singing their praises, I'm going to let them introduce themselves very briefly, and then we'll head on into the conversation. So Anthony, if I can just start with you.
Sure. Thanks, Andrew. My name is Anthony Bennett. I am one of the founders of Bennett Hay, and essentially we shape tailored experiences for clients in London within workplace, and deliver services such as reception, catering, events, and other blended soft services. Okay,
Roy?
Hi, I'm Roy Westwood. I'm one of the founders of Forward Associates. We've been in business since 2015. We're predominantly a guest-centric organization. We look at guest experiences across multiple facets of life, but predominantly venues, offices, and hotels and retail. Previous life was pretty much in hospitality with high street brands and very large organizations such as Levy Restaurants, etc. Lots of exposure to food and beverage and FM and facility management generally. Thank you.
Okay, Chris?
Chris Sheppardson, founder of EP. We focus on knowledge share, bringing companies together and people together to collaborate, share knowledge, explore different ideas and innovation.
Excellent. So I think everyone that's listening in will agree we've got a really good panel of experts that can talk from FM through to much bigger picture into the hospitality sector, and also what's happening from a design perspective. And I think my first question is much more about where we are as a society. And one of the massive shifts that we've seen is how we're working. And probably the last time that it happened was in the 80s and 90s, when the whole drinking and smoking culture finished in the office. It absolutely was just not done. It was out of bounds. And I just wondered, post-COVID, do you think office culture will change? Roy, as a sort of a designer, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I hope office culture doesn't change. I think we were progressively moving in the right direction towards having offices that, you know, had removed cubicles, walls, and where directors sat in glass offices and never interacted with their employees, towards a much more social, collaborative, co-working environments. Fortunately, all of those assets that we've removed are probably the exact polar of what social distancing is all about. But I think we were, as organizations, as companies, really moving towards being able to empower employees and work in a very, very collaborative approach. So I genuinely feel the momentum we were on in terms of designing these offices, and everyone knows the likes of Google and Amazon and how they've broken the barriers between what is the traditional office to a much more social-based collaborative office that also allows employees flexibility in terms of their working times, working environments. I genuinely believe that was the right approach for us as a society. I think it's at the right time, and it was developing in the right direction. So I really, really hope that COVID obviously doesn't change that, but naturally there are going to be implications as a result of this, absolutely.
Chris, you're very involved in the wider hospitality sector. Do you see office culture changing, workplace culture changing?
Yeah, look, I've got the polar opposite view to Roy, actually. Sorry, Roy.
That's okay.
I think office cultures, particularly in professional services, wasn't good enough, actually. So if you look at the research, there's only 12% of employees felt engaged when they went in the office pre-COVID. You had people who generally felt quite stressed. We know mental health issues were on the rise, of 1 in 4 suffering from mental health issues. I'm hoping that we'll see actually real change. I think to get people engaged, because actually what this period had done, we have disengaged a lot of employees to actually away from the office to want to work from home. Now, I think what they're looking for is a halfway house of how we can change offices again, to be more social, to be more collaborative, to take away some of that stress. and actually find a better place. And that will come down to the services that are now generated, is how people are engaged. Productivity has been falling gradually over the last 10 years for good reason. People are tired, they're feeling more stressed, more unhappy. And actually now the real challenge is how do we get productivity up? Because we won't rebuild the economy. So it's going to be a fascinating challenge coming up, but actually I think it's a good opportunity.
And Anthony, I can only imagine you're very hands-on with the impact of post-COVID and what people are up to. Is there going to be a change in culture?
Yes, yeah, I think there will be. I think that what COVID has done is forced the big test of can companies continue to operate whilst all their workforce is at home. And for a number, I think they've been pleasantly surprised that actually they've been able to continue operating and keep things moving. However, I think that there's so much research to show how bringing people together in a building, increases productivity, and I don't think we'll ever come away from that fact. However, I think the big change will be flexible working. I think that COVID has driven that response, and perhaps there are certain organisations that didn't necessarily view working from home as a good thing, and I think now all companies are realising that this could work, and this halfway house that Chris is talking about, I think is the opportunity. But where we come in when people do return to work is very much how do we further enhance the environment to be more engaging and to provide spaces that are more suited to the activity of their work. And I think that'll be the big change we see.
Do you think we'll see head offices reducing in size?
I think that yes, there will be an element of that. I think it may vary by sector. We're seeing certain sectors seeing it as a bit of opportunity to really analyse the sort of activity-based working. And so, certainly some of our clients that I've spoken to, that they're observing that if you've got a task to do that needs your full attention, working from home works very well. But if you need to have an activity which is more collaborative, where you need to bounce off people, where you need to be more creative, being together, physically together, face to face, is a far better and more productive way of doing that. So I think numbers will reduce, but the service level may increase, which is an interesting one. But we're starting to observe this. We're getting more requirement for more of a blended team approach. So because service is becoming very mobile now, we're obviously working with technology to be able to bring food and drink to wherever someone is in a building. For our receptions to be able to send notifications if reception areas are getting too busy. So I think technology is going to become, a key part of that.
But Chris, just over to you. Surely, as you identified, or as Anthony identified, having an office is about working better together, and you talked about the fact of sort of productivity going down. Surely this is just a short-term thing, this whole sort of
I'm tempted. I think there's two parts to it. I think it is a short-term. I think people want to come back to the office. I think they lack trust in getting into the office through public transport. So we've got to bridge that. So London has a real challenge, I think it's fair to say, at this point in time. There's a lot of software coming out. And then there's a program on BBC, I think on last weekend, talking about how many companies are now downloading software into people's laptops so they can actually measure what people are doing from home. I just think that's awful. It's intrusive. It's actually measuring how often you use your mouse. Well, I mean, that isn't accurate. It doesn't really talk about how much you're talking on the phone, even though there's apparently people who do measure that too. But you're getting very intrusive if you do that. And actually, one of the reasons why people were disengaged in office life before, because it was becoming too controlling and too much just around looking at a computer. So somehow, I think we've got to create new services and look at space in a different way to look at how can we actually get people up in productivity by inspiring them in different ways. That makes any sense. I think it'll go back to a more 9-to-5 type culture. I think people working too long hours previously. I think we've got to think much more differently about how you increase productivity of the human, not just long hours and computers and emails and measuring.
So, Roy, presumably that means that we're going to see, if potentially smaller offices, we're going to see some big impact, beautiful spaces.
Well, again, I think it does vary sector by sector. I think certain technology companies have adopted very much the philosophy of creating a lot of social spaces for their employees. They've adopted the sort of things Chris is talking about in terms of not monitoring their employees to the nth degree. They've adopted the philosophy of allowing employees not to just sit in front of their computers by creating multiple spaces where they can go and collaborate. There's sofas, there's rest areas, there's tranquil areas, there's areas where you can actually go and just relax, play Lego, go play ping pong, play table tennis. So when I was making my first comment, these are the sort of offices I was reflecting on as I hope don't change. It's actually the old institutions who haven't adopted this philosophy is probably where Chris's stats are very much coming from. And it's these new organizations, the younger managing directors, the founders who have set up these new sort of disrupted industries that I hope really the rest of the industry now follow from, because a lot of their philosophy around working from home, around flexible working, around not coming into the office every day, around not traveling an hour and a half and being in the office till 8 o'clock, or actually letting the employee choose. Some of them even have, children care services incorporated within the office. It's these organizations, these offices that I think were setting the benchmark even before COVID, that maybe some of the more traditional institutions now have to look at, reflect upon the stats that Chris and Anthony have just stated, and work out how they can join this potential office revolution. And that's what I was sort of referring in terms of the traction we were starting to make in office design and office culture that I hope is really adopted. I genuinely believe if you want employees to be fundamentally more productive, it's not about monitoring, it's about trusting and giving them freedom to they want to do the best they can do. We've got to create a culture that allows them to perform at their best within their own individual remit.
Okay. London's cityscape is defined by huge office spaces. I'm thinking Cheese Grater, the Gherkin. Do you think there's still going to be this sort of the impact, or will there still be the same design significance attached to them when someone's designing a new space, or actually is it all about the internal of the building?
I guess a lot of it depends on what really happens long-term or short-term with COVID and how long this remains in place. The longer we have to social distance and the more that becomes embedded in the way society over a longer period of time, the more that's going to have to be reflected in the design of spaces. Again, going back to offices that have removed cubicles, offices that have brought people closer together. None of that works within social distancing. That becomes very, very difficult to achieve within office spaces. But one of the key things that you've got to remember is that if we have to give more space per person, you're actually going to need more floor space to be able to accommodate more employees. So even if you have a certain level of employees who work from home, and then you have a smaller percentage who come in, do you actually need more floor space just to accommodate that smaller percentage? So I guess it's still a bit of an unknown.
So, Anthony, can you give me some examples of how you or how your clients are trying to encourage employees back into the workspace?
Yeah, I mean, picking up Roy's point around, for Bennett Hay and our clients, we're kind of working day by day, week by week, as things unfold, in the same way the government's trying to steer the country out of lockdown. So, all you can do is plan scenarios, and we're not entirely sure which scenario will play out. And every client is different, every location is different. So it's really important to take it, location by location. But some of the things we're doing is obviously preparing the workplace, so and supporting our clients with that. So it's everything from ensuring the social distancing is there. I think one of the big things to encourage people back to work is the safety aspect, really, and trying to put their minds at rest that it's a safe environment to be in. The biggest challenge we can't control is the commute that Chris was mentioning earlier. I mean, and for London, that is tricky. There's not much we can do around that, and I think that what we're seeing is clients creating, for example, virtual tours of their space for employees to see the steps they've taken to make them safer. And a lot of them are asking for volunteers actually in the first, say from sort of mid-June at this stage or July, with most companies looking at a kind of return in September, albeit of reduced numbers, So I think it is about building confidence, and Roy used the word trust, and it's an interesting journey, and it's only going to come from from being very open and honest, and we've been working on signage within operations, and how do we ensure that customers, we're almost telling customers more than we have done previously. Of course, we've always run very safe environments and very hygienically clean. However, we need to make sure that customers understand that and can see the steps we're taking.
So you mentioned confidence and trust. Are those the sort of key areas that people should be looking at, Chris, or is there anything else that employers should be demonstrating?
It's an interesting one, isn't it? I think that the employee will take it as a given that the health and safety and the cleaning is going to be up to scratch. And they know a lot of work's gone into that. It's been a lot of great work, a lot of great education. I think the thing that's going to bring them in is actually about meeting people, social interaction. I think the food service opportunity is huge, because I think that's one thing that can really bring people back. And I think just services generally. I think people want to get back to the office, actually. I think there's a real desire. They just want to trust that process and actually make sure it happens in a gradual process so they feel safe themselves.
Why you talked about the food service piece being a potential major impact. Why?
Well, I think people enjoy, I think everyone's been cooking for themselves quite a long time now. I think people want to get back and actually experience different things and come together over food. I think there is a real desire to get back and start socializing again, but in a safe way. I'm really interested whether the 2 meter or where the social distancing is kept to. I'm a bit dubious about it, I have to say. I mean, all the evidence you can see in London or on the beaches is that it's breached the whole time. So I'm not so sure people are going to keep this social distancing. I just think there's a hunger to get back to your own group and actually want to have that social interaction again and be humans again and start life again.
And is the 2 meter sort of distancing rule the biggest thing that you've had to consider, Roy?
It depends project by project. A lot of clients have sent us their floor plans and they want to know how many desks they can physically get into a space. A lot of clients have also sent us floor plan of auxiliary spaces, the spaces that are generally used for social interaction with their employees, and wondered whether it's appropriate to put desks within those areas. I don't think anyone's there haven't been any real knee-jerk reaction in terms of making sort of significant decisions around permanently removing desks. It's just people really are planning for eventuality, and they need to understand how many employees obviously are able to accommodate any given space that they have, and therefore they need to accommodate for those plans. Kitchens has been a really interesting one for us. So we've had quite a lot of kitchen plans being sent to us, and looking at how we can distribute so people can work, the employees can work and chefs can work safely within a kitchen. Can kitchens be zoned so that different production is done in different areas within those kitchens, both on large scale and small scale? So people are really just trying to understand how to utilize their space better in regards to social distancing. But as Chris says, I think there's definitely from a general person perspective, there's genuinely an appetite to just get on and be human again. This is very unnatural for us to keep this social distancing. But as an employer, you've got to obviously accommodate the guidelines that are then passed down by the regulatory bodies. So it's finding that balance between the two.
Yeah, And the one thing that no one ever talks about is actually people want to share ideas and have conversation again. I mean, I think we all feel starved of that, don't we? And actually, the biggest thing I get from most companies is actually they want to collaborate with other companies just to share ideas about how to get through this. And I think that's more a desire for conversation, actually, and just exploring ideas and sharing, sharing our common, what we normally do. I think that's been underrated in quite a big way.
Yeah.
You mentioned one of the big fears of workers coming back to the office was public transport. TfL massively heightened their cleaning regimes. And another thing that some research I saw was employees were worried about lifts and getting into communal areas and pinch points. So Anthony, how are you dealing with that?
Well, it tends to be areas that our client teams are looking at specifically. However, where we are supporting, we're seeing in the short term, and again, all they can do is, as everyone's been saying, is sort of follow the guidelines today. And so they're making sure that things like lifts, for example, they're marking them up so that instead of 8 in a lift or 16, you have 4.
Wow.
And people are standing in certain spaces that are marked up facing the inside of the lift, through to sort of loading bay lifts, where again the numbers are reduced and there's spaces to stand, etc. So those are the kind of steps that clients are taking today to get that ready. Encouraging people to take stairs, one-way systems around the office. So all these kind of customer journey, flows are being considered. I mean, the other one is technology. I mean, I think technology is going to continue to, I think, accelerate in workplace, because we're working with one business where we have a community app where we can send notifications to customers when they're within 10 meters of the building to say, can you come back in 5 minutes if there's a congestion in reception. So it's just a couple of examples of where people are trying to go as far as they can to look after the short-term challenge, hopefully. But you can see how then technology will switch into more of a service, having done that. So that we're seeing a lot of potential for this increasing trend for personalization, and so I think that'll be one of the things that comes out of this, is that as a food service business, we'll be expected to be far more mobile with our offer, and customers will expect to have their offer personalized more via their mobile phone and either delivered to their desk or to a delivery point or collect. So those are some of the things we're seeing as potentials.
Is that a trend that must be a trend across the hospitality industry, Chris?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, what Anthony's saying is spot on. I think services are going to have to adapt, and people are going to have to think differently about service in a whole range of new ways. And in some ways, that's the exciting piece, isn't it? Mm-hmm. It's terrifying because everyone's going to have to change, and it's very hard to change models. And I think Roy was saying earlier, if you only got 60% people back in the building, is that a feasible model to work off? I suspect it's not. So companies are going to have to think, well, how do I actually make this model work? How am I going to change? How am I going to be flexible? What can we do differently? What services can we introduce to increase spend or not increase spend? How do we make sure people really want to come and engage in this building? It's going to raise for people like Anthony and Roy a whole range of questions they've got to answer over the next 3 months. No pressure.
It sounds very expensive to business.
But it is exciting at the same time. It's one of those really weird ones, isn't it? Because we all sit at home in very safe environments. And actually what's happening is an incredible pressure cooker building all the time. But if you get it right, it could be a great opportunity. But it is going to ask everyone to think differently to ever before.
I mean, it has been referred to as the global wake-up call. We've seen that the skies are clearer. We've seen animals wandering through cities and all of this kind of thing. And there's lots of talk about us becoming kinder to the environment and more generous to our immediate surroundings. And I just wondered, you talked about, making taking the density out of buildings. And as I said, it sounds like it's becoming really expensive for an office. So if we're becoming more environmentally aware of everything that we're putting in, are there cost implications, and how's it been played out in FM? You know, from the point of view of when you build something, what materials are we using? Packaging, everything needs to be individual now, Anthony. That must be horrendously expensive for a company.
Yeah, I mean, there's great things environmentally, you know, during this lockdown, and equally there's some not so great things as well. And as is always the way with the impact on environment, you know, I think there's always this kind of you know, positive and negative. And I mean, we've done lots of projects in the last year where, you know, we're looking to create a completely sustainable cafe, and that's everything from the materials we use, recycled yogurt pots for countertops, through to, you know, recycled uniform and upcycled and repurposed furniture and all sorts. But you know, I sadly, I think the benefit to the environment is a temporary one. You know, if you look at any recession, the global emissions always drop and then they quickly rise again. And I think that, you know, I mean, I think it's something like a quarter of all global emissions come from transport. So it's, you know, we're not traveling to work. So there is a benefit, clearly, but I'm not sure that's going to stay. We did a lot of work around reusables and getting rid of packaging, to the point where, you know, a third of our operations were, you know, nearly not using packaging and using reusable containers, and creating quite a good culture within workplace. But actually, we're going to have to go back to packaging in the short term, which is a real, you know, is a real shame. But it is kind of the only way to you know, build confidence in the short term. I mean, there is no direct link between, you know, the virus transferring through food or packaging. However, you know, we've got to take those steps in the short term.
And Roy, from a sort of a design perspective, I read somewhere that ultraviolet light was really, really positive, but is a good way, not to eliminate, but to eliminate.
Yeah.
But surely that's the ugliest thing possible.
Yeah, I mean, it's ultraviolet C, which also doesn't penetrate the skin, so it doesn't do any harm to the human body. But the idea is to disguise it within a design of an environment. You're not just going to shine ultraviolet light as your ambient lighting. You're going to have to work with that particular product embedded in a whole lighting solution. But yes, I mean, I read the same article or a similar article that ultraviolet light C, grade C, does kill the virus, yes. So if that is a solution, then, you know, if you think of some of our environments, especially the food service environment, or where people do congregate, you know, is that an opportunity? It will be one of many that engineers and scientists, I'm sure, are exploring. The other one is air filtration systems. So there are proven air filtration systems that can be embedded into the airflow, air circulation of these large properties, like buildings. Could they be used to, again, filter the virus out? So these are all of the potential design implications that need to be considered, not just for this, but long term. Yeah.
And Chris, from an employee welfare point of view, obviously the hospitality industry is one that's been affected the most. There's lots of people on furlough. There's a lot's about to happen. What are people doing for employee, you know, to help their employees through this?
Oh, there's a lot. In fairness, each company is doing a lot of good work internally. I think this is going to come to crunch point June, if I'm honest, because obviously people are going to have to make redundancies June, large companies anyway, if they're going to hit the end of July, end of furlough, and they want to meet that point. So I think June is going to be more tricky, and the tension's going to raise. I think the real concern by many is about young people, because they seem to be the one in the firing line. And there is a danger of spending so much time trying to recruit good people in and attract so much talent. You could lose some great talent. I mean, I think in hospitality, it's estimated 1 in 3 jobs could go, which is huge. So there's a huge piece about reassuring people, trying to help them through this. It's not easy. I mean, Anthony was talking about what he's done to try and retain, you know, and keep jobs going. I think we all have an onus to try and do that, but it is going to be very tough. So the employee piece is great to keep the culture going. There's been some great work by people. but the next 2 months are going to be particularly tricky. Now, we need to go through that, if I'm honest, to get out the other end and start rebuilding. And I think once we get to the rebuilding, actually, then there'll be a better, we'll see some momentum. I do think the bounce will come in September, October. I'm more bullish than some. The view is the virus will die. It's going to naturally die its death, assuming we don't get a second spike. If we get a second spike, this all sounds a bit silly. But I'm told it'll be potentially dead by September. If that's the case, then actually people can start reliving and rebuilding in September and October.
And Anthony, what are you doing for employee welfare at the moment for your guys?
Well, picking up some of our earlier discussion points, we found that engagement has been incredible, and we thankfully we chose a year and a half ago to launch a private community for our colleagues, and during this time for our clients as well. And we found that certainly our colleagues, the engagement has been incredible, and actually it's served as a really important way of checking in with them, really, aside from smaller groups and keeping in check with them each week. But just in terms of keeping spirits up, really, and Robin and I do every couple of weeks we do a conversation with our colleagues, just to sort of give them the chance to ask any questions or just hear from us, really. And clearly what we're aiming to do is give them a very open and honest account of, how things are. So it is about being very open with people, and we've had some great feedback just in terms of keeping in touch, really, and trying to give them as much information as we have. And really that's all we can do. But I think also it's about trying to second guess with scenario sort of basis. What are things going to look like the other side? And we look at our people as a collective group rather than location by location. So that's kind of how we're looking at things right now. How do we what additional services and opportunities might there be, and therefore how can our collective group of people help us in those areas? So those are the kind of things we're working through at the moment.
Okay. And another part of the wellness piece is,
I think we haven't had requests yet because our catering operations are all closed down at the moment. However, we are seeing, for example, Kate, our nutritionist, has been doing a series of videos just to provide weekly tips to our colleagues to keep them, their well-being. Even simple things like maintaining a routine. The change in routine from working from home or even not working at home, and being on furlough. It's trying to support our colleagues on that front. And what we found is that actually clients are looking to us to provide that kind of professional input to be able to share with their people as well. So that's been interesting. But I think one of the things from a nutritional point of view, nutrition is going to become even more, critical, I think, to the workplace. It's always been there, but one of the campaigns we're working on right now is immune system support. And so it's about carefully designing an offer and providing the credible information associated with that offer, so that customers can either follow menu programs or have advice for when they're at home as well. So that's what we're trying to look at the moment, and Alistair, exec chef, and the team are chipping away at that at the moment.
Sounds like a lot of fresh salad, hey, Roy?
Yeah, well, I definitely echo his comments around, you just look out as you walk around the streets at 8 in the morning, how many people are jogging, how many people are on their bike. Everybody's naturally, obviously, looking to boost their immune system in every way possible. And I think the workplace food and beverage environment is going to be critical to that. It's one of their main commitments as one of their core meals. Discussion we had, funnily enough, somebody mentioned something around raw produce. So will consumers react just as well to raw produce? Somehow there's this belief that anything that's cooked is much safer because it kills the bacteria. So that raised an interesting question around fresh salads. Obviously, as Anthony has said, that you're probably moving away from the big salad bowls and the salad buffet areas to much more individual sized portions that are much more controlled and less touch, or less people being able to touch them. but one of our clients is moving towards all of their salads being cooked salads rather than fresh salads. So you're still getting all the nutrients. There's steaming broccoli and green beans, and just of this perception that the bacteria lives on raw food rather than the bacteria having been destroyed through a cooking or a mechanism. I'm not sure if there's any scientific fact behind that, but again, the human psyche doesn't always work just around scientific fact, I guess. And we've got to bring a level of confidence to reassure people that what they're eating is safe. Yeah.
Okay. Just moving on to the whole technology piece. Anthony, you talked about using technology to communicate with your teams. Roy, from a design perspective, how important is technology now?
It was already becoming at the pivotal of every brief, and a lot of time clients knew that they had to put technology in and didn't necessarily consider all the advantages of why. I think this has obviously forced people to look at technology in a way that's going to utilize, I think, communication and potentially some help in terms of social distancing. I think the communication element is going to be critical, but also the option to give people different ways of eating. So, maybe some of the younger workers are going to be very happy coming to the canteen every day and even socializing, maybe, as Chris says, maybe not even keeping social distance. But what about more vulnerable employees who want to come to the office, don't want to work from home? So I think technology plays a part in maybe delivering the food to the desk, or to be able to create zones for people, I think is going to be hugely important. So I think having that communication loop, I think communication is key, Anthony, and I think technology is a massive player in communicating with the client, but also having the ability to bespoke different products to potentially different workers who may not all be as confident or as comfortable, depending on their circumstances. We may even have a may have had the virus scenario versus people who have not had the virus. So if you had it and you're immune to it, are you then going to be much more comfortable just walking to the canteen and not caring, or into the workplace restaurant? But some people are going to be more cautious, and technology has to play a part in being able to get the right menu and the right food over to them. Yeah.
And Chris, technology has been a big part of the high street and apps that you order with. Can you see this playing out through food service?
Oh, undoubtedly. I mean, I think the big thing here is actually how technology is going to affect the work-life balance. And I think that's probably the bigger point, because I think the bit we don't really analyze enough is actually this has been a bit of a surreal 3 months, isn't it? For a lot of people, actually, they've enjoyed it. Hugely, they've actually enjoyed their time at home. They've built better family relations. They've spent time with their children, and actually they don't want to lose that. So I think a lot of work is going to have to go into HR and human asset management to work out how do people retain what they've actually fallen in love with again, and actually then also get their productivity up and less time in the office. So I think the services that Anthony and Roy produce will be crucial in how we find that right balance. So that's going to be a real battleground, I think, over the next few, as everyone tries to find that balance. People are going to have to think differently about people and how we engage people and how we use technology to find productivity and balance rather than about control. I think Roy's point about trust earlier is going to be crucial in this. So there's so much to work through, probably over about the next 8 weeks. So it's going to be a really interesting time.
And do you think inevitably there are people that are much more willing to use technology, will use an app and sort of rely on it? Roy, you mentioned the have-hads and the have-had-nots of the virus. Do you think there's going to be different people coming into the office?
Well, the virus definitely affects different demographics of society in different ways. So naturally, that's going to cause anxiety for certain people who are more vulnerable to the virus. And if they don't know whether they've had the virus, and even if you've had the virus at the moment, we don't know whether you're immune to it again or for how long. Naturally, that is going to cause a potential change in the way workforce behaves. You can sort of see the 20 to 30 to maybe 40-year-olds being a little bit less cautious, and then your older workforce who's still a little bit more vulnerable. So, that could create a sort of two-tier working society if we're not very careful. And as Chris says, for human resource, this has to be a major consideration. Previously, we've had human resource plans for groups or for our workforce as a whole. Are we almost going to need human resource plans for considerable individuals because of their possible vulnerability to the virus? Unfortunately, that is the reality of the virus. There's nothing we can do about that. It just attacks certain demographics harder. We don't want to alienate those demographics. Those are hugely important demographics within any workforce. And sometimes the elder demographic is the demographic with the knowledge, is the demographic that's inspiring our next generation and the younger employees. We have to make sure that they don't feel that they're not welcome within that whole social group. And I think we have to focus harder on how we make sure that they're just as inclusive, just as comfortable, and just as confident coming to the workplace, because many of them will not want to just be at home, and they may want to balance their week, as Chris says, with the advantages that they've seen, but also I think there is a natural return to wanting to go back to the office and socialize with people, and that they are affected harder. What are we going to do for these guys?
That's rather chilling, isn't it, Anthony?
No, I mean, I kind of come back to, I think that the future of the workplace is, we've often talked about hotels, and I think the workplace is going to become even more like a hotel, to the point where individuals are designing their day at the office. That's how I see technology will be able to, and it sort of comes back to the personalization agenda, because companies in the short term are going to want to know who's coming into the office. Do they need a desk? And we're even working on things like, what type of tea do they want to drink during the day? Because we're going to need to do a drop to their desk so they don't have to put their hand in a jar of tea bags, And so I think that's the opportunity I see in food service now. It's if you get the technology right, you can then personalize someone's experience in the workplace. And that will require a different service delivery, and it'll move us away from someone standing at a till. That person can now be repurposed to be a floor host, to go and deliver, to go and and I think those are the kind of things that that will be developing over the next longer than 8 weeks we'll need, but
That's putting it like that sounds absolutely amazing. And the whole designing your day in the office. So does that mean that you're also involved in sort of the after hours things? Are you getting more involved in what people do at home and the sort of value add to their employee benefits?
Certainly, that's an area that we're thinking about, because if it goes back to this scenario working, so one scenario is that for some companies and some sectors, people do continue to work from home. Let's say half of the workforce. So that scenario, you then start thinking about their time at home. We've been advising our colleagues on routine. And I think that the duty of care is almost going to extend to the home as well, which is an interesting line, because how far do you go with that? How far can you go with that without I guess ensuring there is still this separation between work and home life? So that's an interesting space. But what I've seen from some of our suppliers is the way that they have been able to adapt to the situation by doing deliveries direct to individuals. If you imagine, our business has dropped away, so they've had to suddenly figure out ways of doing that, and obviously we've been supporting them with that. But it's a good example of how suddenly we're impacting people at home as well as at work, and I could see that happening more and more.
Chris, I can see why you're so upbeat about the new hospitality business.
I think it's a really exciting time. I mean, I do. I think it's actually a time of very progressive thinking, and I think people got to think differently. You do, on saying that, as a note of caution, because actually one of the most common comments I get from people pushing back, business leaders pushing back, is, at the end of the day, we're running a business, and actually economics will speak the truth. And there is a point. The point is, actually, we got to find a way of re-engaging teams to get productivity up and get businesses running again. Where I disagree, and that's why I think it's quite an exciting time, is at the end of the day, pre-COVID, productivity was declining time after time. People were getting more and more stressed, more and more disengaged. And this actually gives everyone a chance to re-engage and have a blank piece of paper to think, how do we actually really want to communicate, engage people, and get productivity up? So this is actually, as horrible as it is, has many challenges we face, actually a really quite good opportunity for us to try and correct some of the wrongs that existed before. So look, it's not easy. It's going to be horrible in lots of ways, but actually it's a chance also to start doing new things and get it correcting some of those wrongs.
Okay. Roy, innovation. Are you seeing this as a massive sort of paradigm shift for the industry, for facilities management?
Yeah, I think this is the time to press the reset button. You have to be innovative through this situation, and we hope that innovation ultimately sticks through beyond this pandemic and becomes something that fundamentally changes our industry. I think, as Chris says, it's a very exciting time within the industry. Every disaster comes with opportunity at the end of it to do things differently, to review what went on before, what was wrong with before, and what comes next. And innovation is going to be a critical skill within that development of out-of-box thinking that needs to be put together in order to look at things in a different way. Absolutely.
Okay. We've talked lots about clients, people and clients teams. Anthony, what have you brought in for your own people, or how are you changing the way that you as an organization work when you're in these offices? So in terms of your workforce?
Well, you mean in terms of the return to work?
Yeah, so when your guys are back on the floor, is it face masks and perspex go through?
Again, it's interesting speaking to different clients, because every client is taking a different approach. Some of our clients are saying we're not coming back till January. Other clients are saying we're doing a voluntary basis in June, and people are going to be asked if they would volunteer to come to the office to sort of lead the way, I guess, in some respects. And then I would say most are saying September as a return. So of course we have a plan sitting here today, but that plan will continue to adapt and change based on government guidance and where we look, where we find ourselves in September and all that good stuff. But certainly we do have locations where our colleagues have returned to work, so in reception areas. And so clearly, I mean, we'd started on this, a good 6 weeks ago with training online. So the first step for us was making sure that with all the media out there and all the kind of, information, if you like, it was making sure that we knew all our colleagues had one consistent message. So we constructed an online training which informed them about COVID-19 and I guess their part in that and responsibility and what it looked like for them coming back to work and also what we're doing to do what we can to support them. So that's happened and everyone's gone through that. Then it's really about clearly risk assessment, location by location, and the PPE, etc. So yes, with it's like you work on this thing today and then it changes next week. So it's quite fluid. But yeah, we've got the masks in, and that will be because again, there's varying views on masks. So I think it's about, again, it's just doing whatever you can to try and keep our colleagues safe. We have some colleagues where our clients very kindly are paying for them to be driven into work. I can think of one individual who's been looking after a mailroom all this time. And he's had his own chauffeur, which he's delighted about, as you can imagine. So I don't think he's looking forward to it going back to pre-COVID.
It must be for everyone in the hospitality industry, Chris. It must be massive amount of training all the way through. Are you seeing that with every organisation?
Well, not yet, because we're mostly on furlough. I think training will come back into it, you're right. And I think there'll be a bigger investment back into people and into L&D programs. I think over the last 10 years, it's halved. in terms of investment, because people have seen it a bit as a luxury and it's gone online and people can do it cheaper. You will see a return to actually new service levels, new service standards, and more training back to, making sure people really are offering. One of the views we get a lot expressed is actually service would be the biggest differential to why one operation will get over another operation. So I think service and how you actually treat people will be in a really important area. And so training will undoubtedly get another lift.
And Roy, from a sort of an aesthetic point of view, all this PPE or it must give you headaches trying to make it look good.
I actually said to Anthony something earlier today. Actually been developing sort of clearer masks so you can see the entire face of the employee rather than a mask that covers some of the most important areas, because we as human beings want to communicate with each other. You can also get these masks now branded and messaged up. You can even get your suppliers to help support the branding of these masks and messages. Of course, we look at aesthetics, but aesthetic is not about just making something beautiful. It's about making the operational beautiful. So it's very, very important that first and foremost, something is operational, and then it's about how do you make it beautiful as opposed to the other way around. Otherwise, it's just art. It's not good design.
Okay. We have a question from the audience. It's targeting you, Anthony.
Sure.
And it says, "Hi, Anthony. Are you getting any clients wanting you to send their employees home? And what are you supplying to the people in the workplace?" But I'm assuming if you've not got many people in the workplace at the moment, not a great deal.
Yeah, I think one of the areas we are looking at kind of comes back to that sort of working from home element to a certain degree, and we haven't had any requests yet, but we are working through a scenario where, because in theory, let's say that, a law firm decides, okay, we'll only ever have half of our people in the office at any one time to the end of this year. They may need to then consider, well, we provide a full catering offer at work. Why wouldn't we provide some provision for people that are working at home? So we have considered that scenario, and both in terms of us producing and providing that service, but also partnering. So we've been talking to a couple of operators to look at partnering in that area. Should it become a requirement? But it's still early days, and there's a bit of a layering of priorities for companies at the moment in terms of and also just holding out to see what shape are we in when they do actually decide people are coming back to work.
Okay, thank you. So I think the name of the game, just sort of summing everything up, is goes without saying, it's a new way of doing things. The density of offices, the amount of people in there, how you change that, and ultimately it comes back to trust. How you display that back to your employees that it's a great workplace to come to, and people will want to come back because inevitably it is the center of the corporate culture. Technology is going to play a bigger and bigger part, but ultimately it's all about employee welfare and great service, which is what the hospitality business is about. Service with a smile, preferably from a see-through mask. So I'd just like to say to all of you, so Chris, Anthony and Roy, thank you very much indeed. I don't think it was a debate. I think it was a conversation, which I'm pleased about. I think it's been an amazing session, lots of insights, and thank you very much indeed, everybody.
Thank you,
Andrew. Thanks.
Thank you.